A lot of people think that because they work from home, they automatically qualify, but that does not mean you're able to take this deduction. So for most W-2 employees, this is not the case. This deduction is exclusively tied to business ownership. Today, I want to talk about the home office deduction because it's one of the most commonly missed deductions I see business owners overlook. And what's funny is that most people have heard of this deduction. If you ask a group of business owners to name a tax deduction, home office is probably one of the first things that they'll think of. But despite being one of the most well-known deductions, it's also one of the most understood. So some people assume that they don't qualify when they actually do, and some people assume that they can just write off their whole entire house just because they work from home every now and then. So let's talk about who qualifies for this deduction and how it's actually calculated. If you use part of your home regularly or exclusively for business, you may be able to deduct a portion of your home expenses. So the keywords here are regularly and exclusively. This does not mean that you answer emails from your couch every now and then, and it doesn't mean you're working from your kitchen table after the kids are going to bed. It means that you have a dedicated office space in your house that's being used exclusively for your business. So you don't have a room with a guest bed in there that you're working from home next to every now and then. So let's say, for example, you have a 2,000 square foot house and 200 square foot home office. That office represents 10% of the home. And so in this situation, 10% of household expenses would be deductible. So things like utilities, internet, homeowners insurance, property taxes. If you own your house, the mortgage interest is deductible, not the actual principal payments. And if you're renting a house, 10% of the rent expenses would be deductible. And then in some cases, repairs and maintenance are deductible as well. If you're getting your house painted or you had the AC fixed, it would be 10% in this example of the AC bill. So when I try to explain this to business owners, a lot of them are surprised because they've realized that they've been paying all of these expenses out and they never considered that a portion of it would be deductible for them. So this is why this one ends up on my list of commonly missed tax deductions. So now let's get into who actually qualifies for this. I think this is where a lot of confusion comes from because a lot of people think that because they work from home, they automatically qualify, but that does not mean you're able to take this deduction. So for most W-2 employees, this is not the case. This deduction is exclusively tied to business ownership. So if you have a Schedule C business, if you have an S Corp, or if you're self-employed, people who are actually running a business out of their house. If you have a home office, but you actually have a office that you rent and you go to in town, then this home office deduction would be denied. So for example, I rent an office space in town where I get out of my house and I go and work. I'm unable to take the home office deduction because I don't have like an exclusive area where I'm completely running my business out of. I have a little desk in my son's room where I'm working sometimes, but that room is also used for my son. And so I'm not able to deduct that portion of my expenses. I have a really good example of someone who actually got audited because they were taking the home office deduction the wrong way. So this person had a W-2 job. They were making about $180,000 a year, and they had a small side hustle. And they also had a dedicated home office in their house. There was nothing else in this room, just a desk, just their computer. This is where they worked. So at first glance, it sounds like they qualify, right? But when the IRS looked at this situation, they found that most of the time spent in that office was for their W-2 job, not on the business, because they logged into work here. They attended their Zoom calls here. This is where they earned their $180,000 salary. The side business only occupied a small amount of their time. So the IRS denied this deduction because the office was supporting the W-2 job rather than the business. And I think this is a really good example because the lesson isn't that the home office deductions are bad, it's that the details really matter. So the home office deduction, it is a legitimate deduction. You just need to make sure that you qualify for it. And if you do qualify for it, don't be scared to take the deduction. I've seen people leave thousands of dollars on the table because they just assumed it wasn't worth the audit risk, but they legitimately qualified, so they absolutely should have taken it. If you're a business owner and you run a business from your home, this is absolutely something you need to be discussing with your CPA, because when this is done correctly, it's one of the easiest ways to make sure you're not overpaying in taxes.